Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly and to Herodotus in Egypt. I am Pemberton. This is part 8. We have chased the Nile to the edge of the known world, 5 reckless young Nasamonians crossing the great desert to a city of small black men beside a crocodile river, and now Herodotus turns from the land to the people, and produces the most delightful list he ever wrote. The Egyptians, he insists, reverse the customs of all mankind. The women go to market while the men sit weaving, they knead dough with their feet and clay with their hands, and they are, beyond any nation he knows, fanatically devoted to their gods. Watch him trace the very names of the gods of Greece back to the banks of the Nile. Let us continue.
I did, however, hear this much from men of Chiron. They told me that they had gone to the oracle of Ammon and had spoken with Euterpe, king of the Ammonians. After they had discussed other matters, they came to talk about the Nile and how no one knew its sources. Euterpe said that some men of the Nasamonians had once come to him. The Nasamonians are a Libyan people who live in the Syrtes, and also in the land east of the Syrtes for no great distance. When these Nasamonians came, Euterpe asked whether they could tell him anything beyond what he already knew about the desert parts of Libya. They replied that there had been among them certain sons of leading men, unruly in character. When these young men grew up, they devised various extravagant schemes, and among them they chose by lot 5 of their number to go and see the desert parts of Libya, to discover whether they could find more than those who had explored farthest before. In those parts of Libya that lie by the northern sea, beginning from Egypt and going as far as the headland of Salamis, the farthest point of Libya, Libyans of many races extend along the whole coast, except for the parts held by Hellenes and Phoenicians. But in the upper regions, above the seacoast, and above the peoples whose land reaches the sea, Libya is full of wild beasts. In the regions above the land of wild beasts it is full of sand, terribly lacking in water and utterly deserted. These young men, so the Nasamonians said, were sent out by their companions well supplied with water and provisions. First they passed through the inhabited country. After they had crossed this, they came to the land of wild beasts. After that they passed through the desert, making their journey toward the west wind. When they had crossed a great expanse of sand over many days, they finally saw trees growing in a level place. They came up to the trees and began to pluck the fruit on them. But as they were plucking it, small men came upon them, shorter than men of ordinary size. These seized them and carried them away. The Nasamonians could understand nothing of the speech of those who captured them, and those carrying them off could understand nothing of the speech of the Nasamonians. They led them, so it was said, through very great swamps, and after passing through these they came to a city where all the men were the same size as those who had carried them off, and black in skin color. Beside the city ran a great river, flowing from the west toward the rising sun, and crocodiles were seen in it. Let this much of the account given by Euterpe the Ammonian be enough, except that, as the men of Chiron told me, he also said that the Nasamonians returned safely home, and that the people they had come to were all wizards. Euterpe conjectured that the river running beside that city was the Nile, and reason compels us to think so. For the Nile flows from Libya and cuts Libya through the middle, and as I conjecture by judging the unknown from what is visible, it begins at a distance from its mouth equal to that of the Ister. The river Ister begins among the Keltoi and the city of Piran, and then runs so that it divides Europe through the middle. The Keltoi live outside the pillars of Heracles and border on the Cynesians, who dwell farthest toward the sunset of all the peoples who live in Europe. The Ister ends by flowing through the whole of Europe and entering the Euxine Sea at the place where the Milesians have their settlement of Istria. Since the Ister flows through inhabited land, it is known from the reports of many people. But no one can give an account of the sources of the Nile, because the part of Libya through which it flows is uninhabited and desert. About its course, however, I have told as much as it was possible to learn by the most careful inquiry, and it flows out into Egypt. Egypt lies nearly opposite the mountain regions of Cilicia. From there to Sinope, which lies on the Euxine Sea, is a journey in the same straight line of 5 days for a man traveling without encumbrance, and Sinope lies opposite the place where the Ister runs out into the sea. Thus I think that the Nile passes through the whole of Libya and is equal in measure to the Ister. Let this be enough of what has been said about the Nile. About Egypt, however, I shall make my report at length, because it has more wonders than any other land, and it has works to show greater than words can express, as much as any land has. For that reason, more shall be said about it. The Egyptians, in agreement with their climate, which is unlike any other, and with their river, which shows a nature different from all other rivers, have established manners and customs for themselves that are opposite to those of other people in almost every matter. Among them, women go to the market and carry on trade, while men stay at home and weave. Whereas others weave by pushing the woof upward, the Egyptians push it downward. Men carry burdens on their heads and women on their shoulders. Women urinate standing up and men crouching down. They ease themselves in their houses and eat outside in the streets, giving as their reason that it is right to do secretly the things that are shameful though necessary, but to do in public the things that are not shameful. No woman serves as minister either to a male or female divinity, but men serve all divinities, both male and female. Sons are not in any way compelled to support their parents if they do not wish to do so, but daughters are forced to do so, however unwilling they may be. In other lands the priests of the gods wear long hair, but in Egypt they shave their heads. Among other people, it is the custom in mourning that those most closely concerned cut their hair short, but the Egyptians, when deaths occur, let both the hair on the head and the hair on the chin grow long, though before this they had been closely shaven. Other people keep their daily living apart from animals, but the Egyptians live together with animals. Other people live on wheat and barley, but for any Egyptian who lives on these grains, it is a great reproach. They make their bread from maize, which some call spelt. They knead dough with their feet and clay with their hands, and with their hands also they gather up dung. Whereas other people, except those who have learned otherwise from the Egyptians, leave their members as nature made them, the Egyptians practice circumcision. As for clothing, the men wear 2 garments each and the women only 1. Whereas others fasten the rings and ropes of sails on the outside of the ship, the Egyptians do this on the inside. Finally, in writing characters and reckoning with pebbles, the Hellenes move the hand from left to right, but the Egyptians do so from right to left. In doing this they say that they themselves write rightwise, and the Hellenes leftwise. They use 2 kinds of characters for writing, one called sacred and the other common. They are religious to excess beyond all other people, and in this matter they have the following customs. They drink from bronze cups and rinse them out every day, and not merely some of them do this, but all. They always wear linen garments newly washed, and they make this a special point of practice. They circumcise themselves for the sake of cleanliness, preferring to be clean rather than handsome. The priests shave their whole bodies every other day, so that no lice or any other foul thing may come upon them while they serve the gods. The priests wear only linen garments and sandals of papyrus. They may not take any other garment or any other sandals. They wash themselves in cold water twice by day and twice again by night, and they perform other religious services that are, one may almost say, infinite in number. They also enjoy many good things. They do not consume or spend anything of their own property, but sacred bread is baked for them. Each of them receives a great quantity of beef and goose meat every day, and wine from grapes is also given to them. But they are not permitted to taste fish. Moreover, the Egyptians do not sow beans at all in their land. Those that grow they neither eat raw nor boil for food. The priests cannot even bear to look at beans, thinking this kind of pulse unclean. There is not only one priest for each of the gods, but many, and among them one is chief priest. Whenever a priest dies, his son is appointed to his place. They consider the males of the ox kind to belong to a Paphos, and on his account they test them in the following way. If the priest sees even a single black hair on the animal, he counts it unclean for sacrifice. One of the priests appointed for this purpose investigates these matters, both when the animal is standing upright and when it is lying on its back. He also draws out its tongue to see whether it is clean in respect to the appointed signs, which I shall describe in another part of the history. He also examines the hairs of the tail to see whether they grow in the natural manner. If the animal is clean in all these respects, he marks it with a piece of papyrus, rolling this around the horns. Then he plasters sealing earth over it and sets upon it the seal of his signet ring. After that they lead the animal away. But for anyone who sacrifices an animal that has not been sealed, the appointed penalty is death. This, then, is how the animal is tested. Their appointed manner of sacrifice is as follows. They lead the sealed animal to the altar where they happen to be sacrificing, and then kindle a fire. After this, they pour libations of wine over the altar so that the wine runs down upon the victim, and after calling upon the god, they cut the animal's throat. Once they have cut its throat, they sever the head from the body. They flay the body of the animal, but first they utter many curses over the head. Those who have a market and Hellenes living among them for trade carry the head to the marketplace and sell it. Those who have no Hellenes among them throw it into the river. The curse they pronounce over the heads is this. They pray that if any evil is about to befall either themselves who are offering the sacrifice, or the land of Egypt in general, it may come instead upon this head. As for the heads of the sacrificed animals, and the pouring of wine over them, all Egyptians have the same customs equally for all their sacrifices. Because of this custom, no Egyptian eats the head of this, or of any other kind of animal. But the method of disemboweling the victims and burning them is appointed differently among them for different sacrifices. I shall speak, however, of the sacrifices to that goddess whom they regard as the greatest of all, and to whom they celebrate the greatest feast. When they have flayed the bullock and pronounced the curse, they take out all of its lower entrails, but leave in the body the upper entrails and the fat. They cut off the legs, the end of the loin, the shoulders, and the neck. When this is done, they fill the rest of the animal's body with consecrated loaves, honey, raisins, figs, frankincense, myrrh, and every other kind of spice. After filling it with these, they offer it, pouring over it a great abundance of oil. They make their sacrifice after fasting, and while the offerings are being burned, they all beat themselves in mourning. When they have finished beating themselves, they set out as a feast what they left unburned of the sacrifice. Clean males of the ox kind, both full-grown animals and calves, are sacrificed by all the Egyptians. Females, however, they may not sacrifice, because these are sacred to Isis. The figure of Isis has the form of a woman with cow's horns, just as the Hellenes represent Io in pictures, and all Egyptians without distinction revere cows far more than any other kind of cattle. For this reason no man or woman of Egyptian race would kiss a Hellene on the mouth, or use a knife, roasting spits, or a cauldron belonging to a Hellene, or taste the flesh even of a clean animal if it has been cut with a Hellene's knife. When cattle of this kind die, they bury them as follows. The females they cast into the river, but the males each people buries in the suburb of its own town, with one horn, or sometimes both, sticking out to mark the place. When the bodies have rotted away, and the appointed time comes, a boat comes to each city from the island called Prosopitis. This island is in the delta, and its circuit measures 9 skoins. In Prosopitis, besides many other cities, there is one from which the boats come to collect the bones of the oxen. The name of this city is Euterpe, and in it stands a holy temple of Aphrodite. From this city many men go out in various directions, some to one city and some to another. After digging up the bones of the oxen, they carry them away, come together, and bury them all in one single place. In the same way that they bury oxen, they also bury their other cattle when they die, for they have the same law about them also, and they also abstain from killing these animals. All those who have a temple set up to the Theban Zeus, or who belong to the district of Thebes, sacrifice goats and abstain from sheep. For the Egyptians do not all revere the same gods equally, except only Isis and Osiris, who they say is Dionysos. These they all revere alike. Those who have a temple of Mens, or belong to the Mendesian district, abstain from goats and sacrifice sheep. The men of Thebes, and those who, following their example, abstain from sheep, say that this custom was established among them for the following reason. Heracles, they say, had an earnest desire to see Zeus, but Zeus did not wish to be seen by him. At last, when Heracles was urgent in his entreaty, Zeus devised this plan. He flayed a ram, cut off its head and held it in front of himself, put the fleece over himself, and then showed himself to Heracles. Because of this, the Egyptians make the image of Zeus with the face of a ram. The Ammonians do the same after their example, since they are settlers from both the Egyptians and the Ethiopians and use a language that is a mixture of both tongues. In my opinion, it is from this god that the Ammonians took the name they have, for the Egyptians call Zeus Ammon. The Thebans, then, do not sacrifice rams but hold them sacred for this reason. On one day in the year, however, at the feast of Zeus, they cut up and flay one single ram in the same manner, cover the image of Zeus with its skin, and then bring up to it another image of Heracles. When this has been done, all who are in the temple beat themselves in lamentation for the ram, and then they bury it in a sacred tomb. Concerning Heracles, I heard the account that he was one of the 12 gods. But of the other Heracles, the one the Hellenes know, I could hear nothing anywhere in Egypt. To prove that the Egyptians did not take the name of Heracles from the Hellenes, but rather that the Hellenes took it from the Egyptians, that is, those Hellenes who gave the name Heracles to the son of Amphitryon, there are many pieces of evidence, and chiefly this. The parents of this Heracles, Amphitryon and Alcmene, were both Egyptian by descent. Also, the Egyptians say they do not know the names either of Poseidon or of the Dioscuroi, nor have these been accepted by them as gods among the other gods. If they had received the name of any divinity from the Hellenes, they would naturally have preserved the memory of these most of all, assuming that in those times, as now, some of the Hellenes were accustomed to make voyages and were a seafaring people, as I suppose and as my judgment compels me to think. In that case, the Egyptians would have learned the names of these gods even more than the name of Heracles. In fact, however, Heracles is a very ancient Egyptian god, and as the Egyptians themselves say, from the time when the 12 gods were born from the 8 gods, among whom they count Heracles, to the beginning of the reign of Amasis, 17,000 years had passed. Moreover, because I wished to learn something certain about these matters as far as I could, I also sailed to Tyre of Phoenicia, having heard that there was a holy temple of Heracles there. I saw that it was richly furnished with many votive offerings, and especially that there were in it 2 pillars, one of pure gold and the other of emerald stone so large that it shone by night. When I spoke with the priests of the god, I asked them how long it had been since their temple was established. I found that they too disagreed with the Hellenes, for they said that the temple of the god had been set up at the same time as Tyre was founded, and that it had been 2,300 years since their people began to dwell at Tyre. I also saw at Tyre another temple of Heracles with the surname Thesion. I came to Thassos as well, and there I found a temple of Heracles set up by the Phoenicians who had sailed out in search of Europa and colonized Thassos. These events took place a full 5 generations before Heracles the son of Amphitryon was born in Hellas. My inquiries then clearly show that Heracles is an ancient god. Those Hellenes seem to me to act most correctly who have set up 2 temples of Heracles, and who sacrifice to one of them as an immortal god under the title Olympian, while they make offerings of the dead to the other as a hero. Among the many other stories the Hellenes tell without proper thought, this tale about Heracles is especially foolish. They say that when he came to Egypt, the Egyptians put wreaths on him and led him out in procession to sacrifice him to Zeus. For a time he stayed quiet, but when they began the sacrifice at the altar, he turned to his strength and killed them all. In my opinion, when the Hellenes tell this tale, they are altogether ignorant of the nature and customs of the Egyptians. For how could people for whom it is not lawful to sacrifice even animals, except swine, clean males of oxen and calves and geese, sacrifice human beings? Besides this, how is it naturally possible that Heracles, being only one person and moreover a man, as they assert, could kill many tens of thousands? Having said so much about these matters, we pray that both the gods and the heroes may show us grace for our speech. The reason why those Egyptians I have mentioned do not sacrifice goats, either female or male, is this. The Mendesians count Pan as one of the 8 gods, and they say these 8 gods came into being before the 12 gods. Painters and image makers represent Pan in painting and sculpture, just as the Hellenes do, with a goat's face and legs, not because they suppose him really to be like this, but to resemble the other gods. The reason why they represent him in this form I prefer not to say. The Mendesians, then, revere all goats, and the males more than the females. The goatherds also have greater honor than other herdsmen. Of the goats, one in particular is especially revered, and when he dies there is great mourning throughout the Mendesian district. In the Egyptian tongue both the goat and Pan are called mens. Moreover, in my lifetime, there happened in that district this marvel. A he-goat had intercourse with a woman publicly, and this was done in such a way that all men could have evidence of it. The pig is considered by the Egyptians to be an abominable animal. First, if any Egyptian touches a pig while passing by, he immediately goes into the river and dips himself in the water together with his garments. Also, swineherds, though they are native Egyptians, unlike all others, do not enter any of the temples in Egypt. No one is willing to give his daughter in marriage to one of them or to take a wife from among them. Instead, swineherds both give in marriage to one another and take wives from one another. The Egyptians do not think it right to sacrifice swine to the other gods, but to the moon and to Dionysos alone they sacrifice swine at the same time and on the same full moon, and then they eat the flesh. As for the reason why, when they abominate swine at all their other feasts, they sacrifice them at this one, there is a story told by the Egyptians. I know it, but it is not a seemly one for me to tell. The sacrifice of swine to the moon is performed as follows. When the priest has slain the victim, he puts together the end of the tail, the spleen, and the caul, covers them with all the fat of the animal that is around the paunch, and then offers them with fire. The rest of the flesh they eat on the day of the full moon on which they have made the sacrifice, but on any day after this they will not taste it. The poor among them, because their means are scanty, shake pigs out of dough, bake them, and offer these as a sacrifice. For Dionysos, on the eve of the festival, each person kills a pig by cutting its throat before his own doors, and after that he gives the pig back to the swineherd who sold it to him, so that he may carry it away. The rest of the feast of Dionysos is celebrated by the Egyptians in almost all respects the same way as by the Hellenes, except for choral dances. Instead of the fallows, however, they have invented another contrivance, figures about a cubit high, worked by strings, which women carry around the villages, with a privy member made to move and not much smaller than the rest of the body. A flute goes before them, and the women follow, singing the praises of Dionysos. As for the reason why the figure has this member larger than is natural and moves it, while it moves no other part of the body, there is a sacred story told. I think that Melampus the son of Amithion was not ignorant of these rites of sacrifice, but was acquainted with them. Melampus was the one who first set forth to the Hellenes the name of Dionysos, the manner of sacrifice, and the procession of the fallows. Strictly speaking, when he made it known he did not take in the whole matter, but the wise men who came after him made it more fully known. Melampus, then, was the one who taught about the fallows carried in procession for Dionysos, and from him the Hellenes learned to do what they do. I say that Melampus, being a capable man, devised for himself an art of divination, and after learning from Egypt he taught the Hellenes many things, among them the matters concerning Dionysos, changing a few points. For I will not say that what is done in the worship of the god in Egypt happened accidentally to be the same as what is done among the Hellenes. If that were so, these rites would have been in character with Hellenic worship, and would not have been recently introduced. Nor will I say that the Egyptians took this or any other customary observance from the Hellenes. I think it most likely that Melampus learned the matters concerning Dionysos from Cadmos the Tyrian, and from those who came with him from Phoenicia to the land we now call Boeotia. Moreover, the naming of almost all the gods has come to Hellas from Egypt. By inquiry I find it true that it has come from the barbarians, and I think it most likely that it has come from Egypt. For except in the case of Poseidon and the Dioscuroi, as I have said before, and also Hera, Hestia, Themis, the Charites, and the Nereids, the Egyptians have had the names of all the other gods in their country from all time. What I say here is what the Egyptians themselves believe. As for the gods whose names they say they do not know, I think these received their names from the Pelasgians, except Poseidon. About this god the Hellenes learned from the Libyans, for no people except the Libyans have possessed the name of Poseidon from the beginning and have always paid honor to this god. It may also be added that the Egyptians have no custom of worshipping heroes. These observances, then, and others besides which I shall mention, the Hellenes have adopted from the Egyptians. But the custom of making images of Hermes with the fallows, as they do, they learned not from the Egyptians, but from the Pelasgians. The Athenians were the first of all the Hellenes to receive this custom, and from them the rest received it. For just at the time when the Athenians were beginning to be counted among the Hellenes, the Pelasgians came to dwell with them in their land, and for this very reason they too began to be counted as Hellenes. Anyone who has been initiated into the mysteries of the Cabaroi, which the Samothracians perform after receiving them from the Pelasgians, knows the meaning of what I am saying. These very Pelasgians who came to dwell with the Athenians had previously lived in Samothrace, and from them the Samothracians received their mysteries. Thus the Athenians were the first of the Hellenes to make images of Hermes with the phallos, having learned it from the Pelasgians, and the Pelasgians told a sacred story about it, which is set forth in the Mysteries at Samothrace. Formerly the Pelasgians used to make all their sacrifices by calling upon the gods in prayer, as I know from what I heard at Dodona, but they gave no title or name to any of them, because they had not yet heard any. They called them gods, Theaius, from some such notion as this, that they had set thence all things in order and so had the distribution of everything. After much time had passed, they learned from Egypt the names of the gods, all except Dionysos, whose name they learned much later. After a time the Pelasgians consulted the oracle at Dodona about the names, for this prophetic seat is considered the most ancient of the oracles among the Hellenes, and at that time it was the only one. When the Pelasgians asked the oracle at Dodona whether they should adopt the names that had come from the barbarians, the oracle replied that they should use the names. From that time they sacrificed using the names of the gods, and afterward the Hellenes received them from the Pelasgians. But where the several gods were born, whether they all existed from the beginning, and what forms they have, the Hellenes did not learn until yesterday, so to speak, or the day before. For I suppose that Hesiod and Homer lived 400 years before my time, and not more, and it was they who made a theogony for the Hellenes, gave the gods their titles, distributed honors and arts to them, and set forth their forms. The poets who are said to have lived before these men were, in my opinion, actually later than they were. The first of these matters, concerning the Pelasgians and the names, are told by the priestesses of Dodona. The latter matters, concerning Hesiod and Homer, are stated by myself. Concerning the oracles, both the one among the Hellenes and the one in Libya, the Egyptians tell the following story. The priests of the Theban Zeus told me that 2 women who served in the temple had been carried away from Thebes by Phoenicians. They had heard, they said, that one of these women had been sold into Libya and the other to the Hellenes. These women, they said, were the first to found the prophetic seats among the nations I have named. When I asked how they knew so exactly the story they were telling, they replied that the priests had made a great search for these women and had not been able to find them, but later had heard the story about them which they were now telling. This I heard from the priests at Thebes. What follows is said by the prophetesses of Dodona. They say that 2 black doves flew from Thebes in Egypt, one of them coming to Libya and the other to their land. The latter settled on an oak tree, and spoke with a human voice, saying that a prophetic seat of Zeus must be established in that place. The people supposed that what was announced to them came from the gods, and they established one accordingly. The dove that went to the Libyans, they say, commanded the Libyans to make an oracle of Ammon. This also belongs to Zeus. The priestesses of Dodona told me these things. The eldest was named Promea, the next after her Timarete, and the youngest Nicandra. The other people of Dodona who were connected with the temple gave accounts agreeing with theirs. My own opinion about the matter is as follows. If the Phoenicians truly carried away the consecrated women and sold one of them into Libya and the other into Hellas, I suppose that the woman who came to the country now called Hellas, formerly called Pelasgia, was sold into the land of the Thesprotians. Then, being a slave there, she set up a sanctuary of Zeus under a real oak tree. This was natural, since she had been an attendant at the sanctuary of Zeus at Thebes, and in the place to which she had come she would remember him. After this, when she learned the Hellenic tongue, she established an oracle. I suppose she also reported that her sister had been sold in Libya by the same Phoenicians who had sold her. I think the women were called doves by the people of Dodona, because they were barbarians, and because it seemed to the people that they spoke with voices like birds. After a time, they say, the dove spoke with a human voice, that is, when the woman began to speak in such a way that they could understand her. So long as she spoke a barbarian tongue, she seemed to them to utter a voice like a bird, for if she had really been a dove, how could she have spoken with a human voice? By saying that the dove was black, they indicate that the woman was Egyptian. The ways of delivering oracles at Thebes and Egypt and at Dodona closely resemble one another, as it happens, and the method of divination by victims has also come from Egypt. It is also true that the Egyptians were the first people to hold solemn assemblies, processions, and approaches to temples, and from them the Hellenes learned these practices. My evidence for this is that the Egyptian celebrations of these things have been held from very ancient times, whereas the Hellenic ones have been introduced only recently. The Egyptians hold their solemn assemblies not once a year but often, especially, and with the greatest zeal and devotion, at the city of Bubastis for Artemis, next at Busiris for Isis, for in that city there is a very great temple of Isis, and the city stands in the middle of the delta of Egypt. Isis in the tongue of the Hellenes is Demeter. Third, they hold an assembly at the city of Sais for Athene. Fourth, at Heliopolis for the sun Helios. Fifth, at the city of Buto in honor of Leto. And sixth, at the city of Papermus for Ares. When they are traveling to the city of Bubastis, they do as follows. Men and women sail together, a great multitude of each sex in every boat. Some of the women have rattles and rattle them, while some of the men play the flute throughout the whole voyage. The rest, both women and men, sing and clap their hands. Whenever, as they sail, they come opposite any city on the way, they bring the boat to land. Some of the women continue doing what I have said, others cry aloud and jeer at the women of that city, some dance, and some stand up and pull up their garments. They do this at every city along the river bank. When they come to Bubastes, they hold the festival, celebrating great sacrifices, and more wine from grapes is consumed at that festival than during all the rest of the year. To this place, the natives say, men and women come together each year to the number of 700,000, besides children.
And we will halt there, among the priests with their shaven heads and their linen and their endless washings, the most punctilious worshippers in the world. Next time, in Part 9, the festivals themselves, the drunken hundreds of thousands at Bubastes, the lamplit night of sighs, the bloody club fight at Papramis, and then the sacred beasts, the cats, the crocodiles, and the bird that buries its own father. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.